What if the person meant to save your child was someone the world had already thrown away? This is not a movie. This is not fiction. This is the story of a 14-year-old homeless boy named Eli. And the night, he walked into a hospital room and refused to let a baby die. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you will never look at a stranger the same way again. His name was Eli, 14 years old, thin as a shadow, lips cracked from the cold, hands rough, not from sports or school, but from sleeping on concrete streets night after night. He hadn't eaten since the day before. His bedroom was an alley behind a hospital, not because he chose it, but because the dumpsters there blocked the wind. And sometimes, when the nurses were kind, they slipped him bread. Sometimes they chased him away. That particular day, the rain came down like the sky itself was grieving. Eli stood near the hospital entrance, soaking wet, shaking, but he wasn't begging. He never begged. He just watched. Watched warm people in dry clothes, carrying things he had never owned, walking into a world that had no place for him. Nobody looked at Eli, not one person. But in a few moments, Eli would see something every trained doctor in that building had missed inside the hospital. In a bright, sterile room that smelled of antiseptic and quiet grief, doctors stood in silence. On the bed lay Noah Hargreave, 8 months old, tubes everywhere, machines breathing for him, his tiny chest barely moving. The lead doctor stared at the monitor for a long time. Then, slowly, he removed his gloves. "I'm sorry," he said softly. Time of death. The sound that filled the room wasn't just crying. It was the sound of a world collapsing. Noah's father, Daniel Hargreave, a billionaire whose name appeared on buildings, whose face was on magazine covers, fell to his knees on a hospital floor. His expensive suit meant nothing. His money meant nothing. Just months earlier, he had buried his wife, Noah's mother, who had died after childbirth. And now the last piece of her, the only piece of her, still breathing in this world, was being taken too. Daniel pressed his face to the floor. He couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. The nurse reached toward the machine to turn it off. And that is when the door opened. No one noticed Eli slip inside. Why would they? He was just a wet, dirty boy who didn't belong. But Eli noticed something nobody else did. The baby's mouth twitched just once. So small, so easy to miss. But Eli had grown up watching carefully. When you have nothing, you learn to read the small things, a look, a sound, a shift in breathing. It's how you survive. His heart slammed in his chest. "He's not gone," Eli said. The room went absolutely still. "Get him out," someone snapped. The nurse's hand moved toward the machine. "No," Eli shouted. Before anyone could react, Eli ran. He grabbed the baby. He pulled the tubes. Alarms screamed. Doctors yelled. Security rushed toward him. But Eli didn't think. He just moved, the way his body remembered holding his little sister before she died. He ran straight to the sink. He tilted Noah forward, let water run gently over his mouth. Not fast, not rough, just enough. "In the name of Jesus," Eli whispered, his voice breaking. "Breathe." Seconds felt like hours. A cough, water spilled, another cough, and then a cry. Thin, weak, but real. A cry that filled every corner of that room. The baby they had just declared dead was alive. Chaos, absolute chaos. Doctors rushed forward. Nurses shouted orders. Security grabbed Ellie's arms. But the baby was crying. They checked the monitors. Oxygen levels rising. Heartbeat weak, but steady. Real. The lead doctor looked at the screen for a long time. Then he said the word that would follow this story for years. Impossible. They ran scans. They checked again. Noah's brain activity had changed. Not healed but waking. Like someone had switched a light back on in a room that had gone dark. No one had a medical explanation. Some didn't try to find one. Daniel Hargreave walked over to the boy, standing wet and shaking in the corner. Arms wrapped around himself. Fear in his eyes. Up close, Eli looked even younger. Dirt under his fingernails. Old scars on his arms. The kind of scars that come from a life no child should have lived. "You saved my son," Daniel said, his voice barely holding together. Eli looked at the floor. "I just didn't want him to die." That night, for the first time in years, Eli slept in a clean bed. The news spread fast. Journalists called it a miracle. Churches called Eli a sign. Doctors debated science versus faith, chance versus something greater. Daniel shielded Eli from all of it. "You don't owe the world your pain," he told him. "But pain doesn't disappear just because a door opens. Eli flinched at raised voices. He slept with the lights on. For months, he kept food hidden under his bed, even though the kitchen was always full. Even though no one would ever take it from him again. Daniel never scolded him. He understood, and slowly, the way sunlight fills a room, not all at once, but gradually, until one day you realize the darkness is simply gone. Eli healed. Noah healed too, in small victories. A step, a word, a laugh that echoed through the halls. Every day, Eli sat by Noah's crib. He talked to him, sang the songs his mother once sang, told him about the night sky, about how it looked when you had nowhere to sleep. But it was still beautiful. The nurses noticed. Noah responded more to Eli than to any of them. One night, Noah's oxygen dropped. Doctors rushed in, and then Noah's tiny hand closed round Ellie's finger. The numbers rose. The doctors stared at the monitor and quietly said, "He stabilizes when the boy is near." No one argued. When Eli was 17, he froze at a crosswalk. Rain fell suddenly, heavy and cold. The smell of wet concrete hit him like a wall. And just like that, he wasn't 17 anymore. He was back behind the dumpsters, shaking, hungry, invisible. His breath hitched, his vision blurred. Then a small hand took his. Noah, 6 years old, looked up at his brother. "Eli," he said softly. And then Noah knelt down beside him, on the wet pavement, pressed his forehead to Ellie's, and whispered the same words Eli had once whispered over him. "Breathe," Noah said. "Please breathe." And Eli did. That night, Eli told Daniel everything. The guilt of surviving when his mother and sister had it. The fear of being sent away. The weight of being called a miracle when he still felt broken. Daniel listened to every word. Then he said, "You didn't save Noah because you were special, Eli. You saved him because you knew what it meant to be invisible. You acted when everyone else had already decided the story was over." Daniel adopted Eli that year, not because of the miracle, but because Eli had already survived enough to know how to protect life when it was fragile. Years later, Eli became a pediatric nurse. Not famous, not celebrated. He worked night shifts, sat with frightened parents, held the hands of children who couldn't sleep, stayed in rooms where machines were louder than hope. Sometimes when doctors turned away too quickly, Eli stayed. And sometimes, a child breathed again. When Noah grew up, he asked Eli once, "Do you think I'd still be here if you hadn't walked into that room?" Eli smiled. "I think love walked in with me." And somewhere, quietly, without headlines or cameras, the world healed just a little more. If this story moved you, share it. Because someone out there needs to be reminded. The people the world gives up on are sometimes the very ones sent to save it. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.